can I get the current number for EAP? I have an employee here who might need some services. Their response was, yeah, we don't have EAP anymore due to budget cuts.
Ooh.
And I'm like, okay, well, so at that point in this agency, we didn't have a peer support team, and it was just there was nothing. There was no. I had nothing to do for that employee, and I kind of felt at like a loss other than what I knew from my psych time, right? And so I just kind of counseled them myself, but I knew at that time that we had to be better.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Ashlee, and we do have, I'm just going to say it because it's like a running joke now, a very special guest today. And this person has turned into one of my very favorite humans quickly. So I'm honored to have him on, and I'm going to let him introduce himself because we got a lot of good content today.
Hello, I'm Chief Deputy Justin Miller from the Kenosha Sheriff's Office, Kenosha County, Wisconsin. I've been in law enforcement since 2002, and prior to that, I was in the Navy as a psychiatric technician.
Which is, I know, Jennifer's face. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, so this is a podcast, but if you guys saw my face, I did not know that was on your resume. My goodness.
Yeah, it's really hard because he knows all the ins and outs too. Like he's with it.
So. The old ins and outs.
No, he's amazing.
I was about to make a bad joke. Okay. Well, we're excited that you're here today, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you sharing that you're a chief deputy. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk a little bit today in terms of your title and what it means to be leadership in law enforcement. And I just kind of want to ask, when did you recognize that investing in mental wellness for the officers you would serve should be a priority or prioritized?
Yeah, so I touched a little bit on some of my background, but yeah, psych tech in the Navy from 95 to 2000. I think about my time when I worked back in the field. It kind of opened my eyes to the world of mental health and full moons. Full moons are a real thing. And
A real thing.
Inpatient psych world, that's a real thing. But I worked in the inpatient unit at Great Lakes, and I think about the medications that we administered. As Navy corpsmen, basically did the work of nurses, right? We actually gave the shots and administered medications, did the surgeries, things like that, right? But I remember like watching those side effects of those medications, the catatonic shuffle, the tardive dyskinesia, things you would see in like those old movies, but then you would see it in real life and it was like surreal, right? My mom's uncle was in an inpatient unit when I was growing up. So I can still remember the smell of the psych unit when you would walk in. And it smelled the same way when I was in the Navy. And then when I got out and I went to Arizona State University, I worked as a psych tech in the Maricopa County Hospital, which was totally different than my time in the Navy because basically like the little room that you're sitting in, I did a lot of coloring activities with the patients and fed them, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't administer medication. So in my time with the sheriff's office, I would say that, I experienced a couple major personal life events in my first 7 years as a deputy. One of them being I had a significant other who committed suicide. And then I lost my mom in 2009. And she was like my best friend. So there was no help offered or even compassion given within this organization, right? And, another event I recall is I was at my uncle's funeral and I got a call from the department and the supervisor on the other end of the phone was ordering me in for duty, like immediately, right? And I was like, I'm at my uncle's funeral. And his response was, and I quote this, well, uncles are not covered by funeral leave, so you have to come in.
Oh my God.
And I remember going to my family and like, hey, I gotta leave because I just got ordered into work, and they were like dumbfounded and just like I couldn't even participate in the funeral for my uncle, right?
Right.
So that was so I fast forward, to my second assignment as a sergeant. I get promoted, and again I get promoted. I think, okay, I'm gonna have a voice in this game, right? And not necessarily that mental health was on my top priority list, but even in the military, you always want to be promoted because you want to be better than the people that, and I use this in a loose term, led you, or I should say manage you, because there's a difference between leaders and managers, right?
Yeah.
I can teach anyone to manage somebody, but to actually lead them I think is a calling, but I won't go into that right now.
I think that's a good point, though. I
It
appreciate
is.
that.
It is.
So I was assigned to the conveyance unit, and one of my employees had some, let's just say, major mental health issues that they were dealing with. And on one of our filing cabinets, I remember there was this magnet for EAP, right? And I just remember seeing that magnet. Never heard anything talked about EAP, nothing, you know. So I gave the employee that information, sent them on their way. Well, they returned like 15 minutes later and said, yeah, the county isn't covered by that anymore. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, they said that we're not covered, that this is an old number or something. So I called my HR and I was like, excuse me, can I get the current number for EAP? I have an employee here who might need some services. Their response was, yeah, we don't have EAP anymore due to budget cuts.
Ooh.
And I'm like, okay, well, so at that point in this agency, we didn't have a peer support team, and it was just, there was nothing. I had nothing to do for that employee, and I kind of felt at like a loss other than what I knew from my psych time, right? And so I just kind of counseled them myself, but I knew at that time that we had to be better, right? However, being a sergeant in that old culture of the department that I work in, I had no voice, again. So I'm like, all right, well, I got to be promoted lieutenant to have a voice. Well, again, find out that that's not the case. So when I was promoted to captain in 2016, again, I finally would be able to be heard because I got to sit at the table. So some other incidents that took place in our agency over the years that I just, I'll never forget is just a couple officer involved shooting calls. One in particular, I was coming out from third shift, and I was asked to bring out the less lethal beanbag gun, right? So I'm like, okay. And I was a hostage negotiator back in my day, right? And they were at a barricaded. Well, the guy was just in his car barricaded, but had a long gun, and the SWAT team was out there. So I was asked to bring out this less lethal. So I bring it out, and I remember my boss was negotiating at the back of a squad car. And so I run up to the back of the squad car with this gun, and I'm like, hey, where is the guy? And he like points, and he's like literally 10 feet in front of us. And so as soon as I get there, I hear, I see the SWAT team. I see, everyone's kind of around, and he's trying to communicate with him. And I see this guy's long gun come out of his window, and then just shots just rained out, right? And I was like, oh, I'm like, what just happened, right? So I remember having to go. I got assigned to go with. I mean, the guy was killed. I got assigned to go with the body to the hospital, and then once I cleared the hospital, they had me bring the mobile command center for interviews and things like that. And I remember the union requesting time for the officers to, leave, kind of what the protocols are now, right? You don't have to talk right away.
Yeah.
There's a level of decompression, all those things. Actually ordered them to all stay on scene, and they were interviewed one by one in this command post, right? So then I think, okay, knowing what I know now, right? I didn't know any better back then, but knowing what I know now, I'm like, oh my God, that was a horrible decision.
Yeah.
The trauma that they just experienced. I mean, I went to the ER with this body, and I'm like, I just remember, I can still see like the guy looked like Swiss cheese. I mean, it was like almost like stuff I've seen in the military from, combat versus, I'm out on the street, and I was probably only a couple years on at that point, and so I think about that. And then I remember that those officers that were involved were told to come back to work in 48 hours and go back onto their shifts, and got zero critical incident stress debriefs, zero opportunity to have counseling sessions where we didn't have EAP, because this was well before
that budget,
the bad magnet, right?
Yeah.
There was, a handful of different officer involved shootings that happened over my time up into my, actually when I was first assigned to second shift as a lieutenant, one of my first months on, we had an officer involved shooting, and I actually bought my shift food, right? I brought it to kind of our safe zone, if you will, right? And I bought them food out of my petty cash, and I got my butt chewed for weeks, right? Because I wasn't supposed to buy food out of my petty cash. It's not authorized. And so, and fast forward, I just buy it out of my own money now, but whatever, so I just remember that was the culture though. The culture was I felt like you don't take care of your people. You just make sure that you're operationally ready. And then those officers again got, thrown back into the road in 72 hours and told, rub some dirt on it, get back out there.
I think the most powerful thing about that, though, in our position, right, is like what you're saying still happens. Those negative things still happen at a lot of departments. Like we still hear that today, right? And so I think that can be the challenge and the frustration is like, and it's amazing that you're on here being open and talking about that, especially in your position, because like for us as clinicians, right, like we still hear of all those negative things of people being like, oh, well, suck it up and get back out there. Oh, well. And it's like, how are we still in this position? And so it's important for us. I do want to ask you, what is your department's current strategy for supporting the mental wellness of your officers after having that culture shift? What are you trying to implement?
Yeah. So I would say that it's my personal number one priority in the twilight of my career, something that I've been pretty passionate about for years. Been trying to change that culture. I've been told my ideas were too grandiose, out of touch with reality, but over the last 8 years, I've witnessed agencies all over the United States implementing the very things that I would talk about, right? Those cutting edge, mental like mental wellness rooms. I mean, in West Virginia, they have I think it's called the Hero Center. It's like a mental health center, right? Like they have a gym, a room with next floor has all those massage chairs, and the next floor is just a meditation room. But those things I'm like, okay, why can't we work out on duty, right? Or whatever. It doesn't have to be workout. Whatever you want to do for an hour, nap, siesta, whatever, meditate. Why does your 10-7 or your lunch have to be eating food, right? Why can't we just do whatever we want during that time? So I think our strategy is to provide a psychologically safe workplace. And again, I've been reading this book, The Fearless Organization, that just talks about creating a psychologically safe workplace that you can feel supported. Our employees have a voice, right? Making sure that everybody has a voice at all levels, have any and all resources that are available and at their fingertips, right? We've actually partnered with this amazing provider that shares some of those same visions as I do. So I think we're getting there.
I've heard good things about that provider.
Yeah. I mean, other than being a Bears fan, she's fun.
That's fire.
Just kidding. I'm not a Packer fan, so it doesn't matter.
No, we actually get along very well because of that.
Right. But currently we have an app called Cortico, which is, a kind of a one-stop shop for wellness, if you will. There's different programs in there. There's one-touch provider, we can program in providers and they just have to hit the button. It calls that provider. Same with our peer support, has meal planning, all these different things, workouts. It's pretty robust. We also offer Smart Dollar from Ramsey Solutions, which is a financial wellness piece, peer support. But the financial wellness is probably one of my larger passions now in the later stages of my life, because I wasn't taught proper financial guidance, from my parents or even in the military. And I just think that, it goes hand in hand. I think the mental health of our officers, there's three or four things, right? Your physical wellness, right? Your financial wellness, your spiritual wellness, and really your resiliency to get over things that may or may not have happened to you in your life, right? Not being a victim of your circumstances, if you will. But the financial piece is that, if somebody is so much in debt, or they're living paycheck to paycheck, or they're budgeting based on their overtime, right? That creates so much stress in their life that every other part of their life is going to be affected. And I've heard you guys talk about it on your podcast about how important the finances are. And so I think offering this program, and I get it, people are like, if you listen to Dave Ramsey on his podcast, right? He's very to the point. right? He doesn't hold anything back, and he could be an acquired taste, right? And I know people don't. I don't.
Love
People
his
don't.
flavor.
They like to play that airline credit card points. He's anti credit cards, things like that. But I always said of Clark Howard. I don't know if you guys know who Clark Howard is, but he's another financial guru that I grew up listening to on the AM radio. Right? He still has his own podcast. But if those two had a baby, I think they'd be perfect because they do. I mean, but they do offer a lot of good advice. So these younger I teach in the academy and I teach officer wellness in the academy, and I've incorporated a lot of the financial wellness because it used to be there was only one slide. The state gives me one slide on financial wellness, and it's the very last slide of a 4-hour presentation.
Jeez.
So I try to incorporate that more throughout the entire presentation, throughout the entire class. But a lot of it is I tell these kids, right? How many of you, this is your first job that you've ever worked, right? Like real job, because we can have 18-year-olds in these classes, you only need to be 18 to be a cop in the state of Wisconsin. So they range from 18 years old to, I mean, we've had people as old as 50 in the class. So they have such different life experiences within that class. And a lot of those prior military folks, right, they kind of can help mentor those younger officers, because those of us in the military, we made the mistakes of going across the street and buying the car for 50% interest because it was cool, right? Even though they told us not to, we just like, we're going. I think the financial piece is good. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. There's a book called The Psychology of Money, and of course I'm blanking on the author's name, but the finances stuff, if it was just numbers of 2 + 2 = 4, I think we would all be able to manage money. That would be a simple black and white thing, and yet it's a real soft skill where emotions are so involved. Like, I want the cool car because that might make me feel cool, and
Yeah.
you have to kind of dig through some of that too. And I think that there's this real marriage of rationale and feelings when it comes to spending money. So I don't mean to get us off track too much, but I appreciate you
Yeah.
bringing
No,
it up in terms of financial stress is a mental drain. And so if
it
we
is.
can address
It
something
is.
like that, that's a skill, like that's a good one. You kind of answered a little bit of my questions in terms of like how you prioritize mental wellness, and that is kind of a compassion of yours as a leader. I want to go back a little bit, and you might not have an answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. I appreciate you being so honest about, hey, I was a sergeant, I'm going to have a voice. Oh, wait, I don't have a voice. Oh, I got promoted to lieutenant, I'm going to have a voice. Oh, wait, I don't have a voice. Do you have in your experience why that is, or what happened in those situations that maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
being hurt?
Yeah. I can give my theory on it, I guess. I think it was the same as in the military, right? There's like you're following this old school thought process. You're following these grizzled, salty veterans that they know it all, right? They're the most important person in every room they walk into. They're the smartest person of every room they walk into. They're not humble at all. There's no humility.
Mm.
I think one of the most important things I learned when I was a new supervisor is they made us take out a piece of paper and they said, write this down. And you're like, all right, you're all eager, right? I am not the most important. I am the least important person in my organization, because as a supervisor, you only matter a little bit, right? Your people matter more. Your people are more important, right? Your employees, without your employees, you're not a supervisor, you're not a leader, right? You need them to, and the higher up you go in the organizations, the more important that really is, I think. So I think along the way, the old culture was, I remember JFD, you guys can figure out the F, do it, right? That's what they would say. JFD, deputy.
Yeah.
Like this generation of our new employees, right? This new generation is a why. They want to know why, right? They want to know what the value they're going to get out of doing what you want them to do, right? So we have to provide. And I think even my generation, I think there's a cultural shift in every generation,
Yeah.
right? And the inability to shift with that culture as a supervisor, or the inability to not be able to learn how to lead those new generations is problematic. I said I would talk about a couple of books. The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni, right? It talks about three key things. It's being humble, hungry, and smart, right? So humble, the humility, right? That speaks for itself. But we have to have humility in our lives. We have to be able to be humble, and that's what we look for in our candidates, right? And I ask every supervisor candidate in an interview what humility means to them, right? And I ask them these three things. I actually ask them all of them. Hungry is the ability to continue to learn, right? To continue to grow. I'm sure you've heard the term leaders are readers, right? We constantly have to be filling ourselves with, substantive matter, like things that matter to us. And, and Ashlee knows, I listen to way too many podcasts. I read way too many books.
Maybe a little.
Sometimes I get like, I'm all over the place. Being hungry is that, but being smart is the emotional intelligence part. Like, how can you read your own emotions and how do you read others, right? When you react into situations, if an employee comes to you and, you guys are having an argument, are you blacking out? Are you shaking uncontrollably? And I mean, I used to have a lip quiver. If my lip would quiver, the employee's like, all right, I'm leaving. Right? But I've learned how to control all that stuff. Like, I've learned how to control my emotions. I know what triggers me. So it's all about trying to learn those type of things. And I think the old generation just maybe didn't embrace concepts like that, or didn't have concepts like that.
First of all, I appreciate you willing to share that and kind of what your experience said of that. And I think sometimes it can be, well, when it's my turn, I'm going to do what they did to me. Like, it is this, like, I have the crown, and so they better bow down. And I really want to thank you and celebrate the fact that you had those experiences and said, well, now I'm at the top, so I'll tell everybody to shut up, instead doing the way that a good leader would be, being like, actually, the best information we get is from the people that are working. What feedback do they have in terms of how we can help and be supportive to their jobs? So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think too, right? Like a way we got here was from you listening to us and being a little frustrated with the things that we had to say about admin and how that can look in organizations. And I remember at first being like, well, I'm going to swear, oh shit, like he might be angry with me for a second. But then I was like, I actually appreciate this because your anger shows me that you care. It's your passion, right? And like, all I can ask for, your hunger, that's a great point. All I can ask for is for people in your positions to listen to us and to reflect on that, right? And to be like, well, we're not all like that. We can make change. Like, we want to make change. And I loved that because I was like, this is kind of the point. I would rather make someone frustrated, but thinking about it than not at all, right? And so I do kind of want to shift a little bit to asking you, like, how do you address some of that stigma with your own officers being in the role that you are in leadership?
Well, so the stigma thing is crazy. Like, my master's program at Arizona State was on human communication. And this is one of the things I tried to study, is like the stigma of why officers don't speak to anyone, right? Why they don't come forward with their stressors or whatever's going on in their life. And unfortunately, in the program, there's not a lot of research out there on it. So I kind of hit a lot of dead ends, but I think we need to, again, create that psychologically safe workplace, making sure that people are able to talk if they're willing, educating our staff on mental health, the effects of PTSD. I don't have where I read it, but I read that an average officer in their career sees 180 to 200 critical incidents in their career. The average lay person, like normal person, sees 1 to 5 in their lifetime, right? And the 5 is more females, unfortunately, because of the sexual abuse and things like that. So again, I teach at the academy for the past 9 years and been teaching college classes since 2009. So I've made it a priority to erase that stigma, or, just talk about the stigma and the fact that it's being broken down. And there is people like myself and hopefully a lot of other administrators out there that embrace the mental health programs that are starting to become prevalent. So I hope that with each generation of officers, that kind of dissipates, right? That stigma will go away, right? As the old school mentality, rub dirt on it, officers retire, that new generation that's been hearing the message, at least for the last 10 years, because I think it's still in the new space, within our profession, that they will start to outnumber those old salty, officers. And then that whole culture shifts, and then that stigma maybe erases itself. I don't know.
I'm going to real quick and then you take over. But I kind of have to call you out a little bit on a positive too, is that I think something you do really, really well is you take yourself outside of your role and you're just a human with your people at times too. Right. So like one example of that would be that I don't know why you wake up at the ass crack of dawn to work out, but you wake up at the ass crack of dawn to go work out, and you work out at the building. So other people are working out with you, right? Like you don't separate yourself from that. And I think that speaks volume, I think, to others too, of just like seeing you for who you are as a human rather than just your role at the sheriff's office, and I think you do that in other places in your life as well, which is really special to people because people struggle with that, right? Or they'll avoid those things when they're in roles such as yours because they let that take over and that's their identity. And I don't think you do that. And I think you do a really good job just being a human too, like finding that balance.
Well, my employees do say if I'm not making fun of them, then I'm probably pissed off for the day. So
they're like, watch out. Go ahead.
Well, I have to say, I'm just really impressed that you did make a budget for a private gym just for the chief deputy that only you could use and no one could look at. So,
right. I wish. Sometimes the music is pretty loud.
Oh God, I've heard about the music debacle a lot.
I'm like, yo, guy, get off my lawn. Turn the music down. Yeah.
Well, I'm going rogue a little bit here, but I appreciate you really giving feedback, to Ashlee of like, hey, you're kind of raking admin over the coals a little bit. Like, give us a chance to talk and recognize like we are trying to do better and are doing better. I want to say that as well. I guess I kind of want to ask like feedback for mental health providers. You really are trying to partner and talk about wellness and supporting officers. What do you need from the mental health providers, from resources, things like that for officers? How can we do better?
Clone yourselves. There's not enough, right? I mean, in any realm. I remember my daughter was 16 and she was having, what 16-year-olds go through. And I called EAP for her and they were like, yeah, it's a 6-month wait. So it's not just in our realm, but in all of mental health world, like profession, right? There's not enough providers. There's not enough folks like yourselves that have the passion to help us. Sometimes we're the helpless, I'm sure, because we're type A personalities by the way that we were raised and brought up, and then the culture of our profession and the not willingness to talk at some, so once you break through our hard candy shell, we're sweet.
You're sweet. You're sweet.
Pretty gooey inside.
Yeah. But I think just the continued support and doing what you guys do. I mean, seriously, it was such a blessing that Ashlee came into our organization's life, right? It was, I don't even know, it was wasn't really a planned event. I think it was just kind of like, hey, we're all in the right place at the right time. And yeah, I think just the continued support and putting the message out there that, we're humans too, and we see a lot, and sometimes we need to talk about it. And and I, from the administrative thing, I hope, that you guys have 100 administrators that are crotchety that are out there listening to this, and they matter, right? Like it matters. The top matters because
it does.
Without the ability or the that want to bring these type of programs into your agencies, there is nothing, right? EAP is such a small little sliver.
It really is.
And if you don't, if your EAP is not fortunate enough to have a provider that's specifically geared toward first responders, it's not going to matter, right? I mean, it's just going to touch the surface, and it's not going to really be able to dig deep into what do we see every day, like what, understanding our profession. And, I've talked to Ashlee about this. I'm like, okay, well, I think about combat veterans, right? The VA system, we get disability for PTSD. At some point, these organizations, these counties and municipalities, the states, right? When are they going to take PTSD seriously for our profession, 100%. Right?
Yep.
So again, I'm in the fight with county, politicians that support you with their mouths and their hearts, and they want to hug you, and we're so, but when it comes to giving us money for these programs, it's they would prioritize, big pens over the mental illness of our officers. So I tend to not have much of a filter, as Ashlee knows. So when I get in front of the politicians in county board meetings, I just let them know how it is. And, it's already too late. We've been fortunate enough to not have any suicides, but we've had officers killed in the line of duty. And actually, one of my good friends, just tragically passed away a few years ago. He was a detective, but and it's already too late, right? But if something happens, we've asked. I tell them the blood is on your hands, right? It's on your hands because there's funds available, right? But we won't get into the politics of it. But at some point, they have to put up the dollars, to support this initiative.
Yeah, and I think for me too, that's a whole learning curve for me coming into the sheriff's office is the political side, because it's very intense and it's very frustrating. And also, though, it's the reality of like, aren't we all working for better communities, safer communities, better relations? And yet we have to start somewhere. And I've talked a lot about this on here. I'm a huge systems theory person. And like, if we're taking care of our deputies, like on the individual basis, they're going to be better when they get out on the road. They're going to be better for our communities. Yeah, and I don't know how that's an argument. Like, so that's what frustrates me is like seeing it from that angle too. Like, if you invest in your people who are doing these jobs and making them better, then yes, your communities are going to get better too. Like, it's how it works as a system. So, that whole stuff is extremely frustrating, and I don't know how you do it day after day.
It's not my favorite part of the job, and I think it was there's insulation at the lower levels. Or there was, right? But we try to expose them more to it now earlier on in their supervisory careers, because it's a shock and awe at some point, and I'd rather them see and be like a transparency, right? See what we see, so they know when we're making decisions, it's not just us. There's other stakeholders that create problems for our initiatives, if you will.
You spoke earlier about finances and how that's a thing, outside of the job that can cause stress. Ashlee and I are here not because we are first responders, but because we grew up in those homes. And so just thinking about the families, and you have an incredible resume, and changing a culture in any place is one of the hardest things you can do. And I can clearly see the efforts that have been made. But I was just curious in terms of, and I appreciate you sharing that you're a parent, like what impact or what, goals down the line, or what would you love to see in terms of how families and family wellness is incorporated?
Yeah, I think it's pretty paramount to a successful wellness program, to be honest. And I'm guilty of insulating my spouse from the traumas of this job, and even my children. Granted, most of their years of comprehending what their dad does have been in a supervisory role, so a little less danger than when they were babies. right now they have access to everything that we have. The Cortico, they get, the Cortico app. My daughter actually used it while she was in college down in Florida, and she needed some help, and it worked out really well. We give all of our family members, and I've even extended it to extended family for the Smart Dollar app, because we pay for 400 licenses. And if HR is listening, just kidding. No. And then they also obviously have EAP available to them. So I think for what we have currently, we've incorporated, but
That's great. That's way more than many.
they need to be more involved though. And I think there's plans, we've talked about dinners, family dinners with, wife's kids. We've had family days in the past. My issue is, and if any of my people are listening, they're going to be upset, but I can't do it all. I need people that have the same passions, and we need to capture those people somehow, and that they have a vision that is hopefully more grandiose than mine. They can come with the ideas. And that's kind of like, I was talking that book, it talks about like making sure that there's teams like in your organization that can just throw stuff at the wall and nobody's going to get upset by it. It's just an idea, right? And they talk about Google X projects in there, and and they actually, if you ran your idea from start to finish, you got a bonus if it failed. Because they want to encourage ideas, right? And I'm an innovative thinker, right? I always am coming up with crazy ideas, and I have my best friend on the department. He always tells me that I have too many, and I make them read too many books. But just yesterday we had an all-encompassing command staff, and had every supervisor. I asked the lieutenants to step out because I wanted to make sure that there was no bottlenecks in the communication process. So we asked all the lower supervisors, then the lieutenants, would it be beneficial for you guys to have a separate meeting with just, the sheriff and I, and the captains? And I said, actually, we will leave the captains out because I want to make sure that you guys, if you're coming up with ideas, that they're not being thwarted at the shift level, right? I said, I've been there. I've come up with ideas, and I would go to my shift commander, and they would just be told, yeah, we ain't doing that, or, oh yeah, I'll bring it up. And then nothing ever happens. And you're like, what's going on? Right. So I just want a level of like transparency, innovation. Like we have core values, that are integrity, leadership, ethical, accountability, and duty, right? That's what we came up with, because mine that I teach in my leadership classes is ITEAL, and it just sounded better with I lead, but ITEAL, I talk about integrity, transparency, being ethical, lawful, and you always have, like, if you do all those things, you will 100% of the time be accountable, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so transparency is super important. And I teach that in my ethics class in the academy too, like about just being, accountable for all your actions. So I know I kind of went down a couple rabbit holes there.
Well, the way those rolled off your tongue, I'm like, I know that's not the first time you've used those. Like
no.
something you say every day. Just in hearing you talk, and talking about families, and I love this like innovation. And I don't know, I'll speak for myself for a second. And I love, Ashlee, your experience, but I could remember being a kid in the late 1900s. And just simple stuff like the LPOA cookout, like it just being, throw some hot dogs on a grill and a public pool, and my day was met.
Yeah.
And to your point, like you can't be the one grilling the hot dogs and lifeguarding, and it does take a team to make those things happen. And it can, I don't know, those were fun experiences I had.
Yeah, I think like that's one thing I present on. I have a presentation that I give on what it was like for me to be a child of a first responder to a lot of my people out in Kenosha. And Like I do talk about that and I do see a difference, but also like department size plays a huge factor. It seems like in it too. But I have to agree, like the 4th of July has always been my favorite because we got special treatment if we went and my dad was working and things just being included in his department. There are things I can speak on his behalf a little bit. They're not, do know 100%, but because we have so many moving parts right now building this wellness program that like from my clinical point of view, wanting to include families in a little bit more educationally, what does it look like to have a first responder in an OIS? What transpires by like keeping families in the loop, right? I'm going to be hosting eventually, hopefully with his approval at some point, days like that to bring in spouses.
Right.
Let's all sit together and let's all talk about this.
Yeah.
Feel included.
Yeah.
It's even things like that because this is a scary job. This is a big job. And when those events transpire, if they already know it's going to come their way, right? A little bit, obviously, like there is some ease to that too. So like not only including families in the fun of what it is, but also I really want to focus on including families in the educational piece as well.
I just want to go to the
Yeah.
but we got to learn stuff. Is that
You
what
got to
you're
learn
saying?
stuff.
No,
Yeah, I can't remember the last time we had I think like a cookout or something. It's been probably 7 years.
Mhm.
the price of eggs, it's just not in the budget. I get
Yeah,
it.
right.
Yeah. No.
I mean, time-wise, I don't want to take all your time, but is there anything that you want to share? Can be anything you want at all to other admin, just in general about mental health. It's kind of any tips, I mean, that you would want to give. Obviously, listening to us and listening to other things, what are your thoughts? It's a pretty big question. So,
Yeah, it's a big one. Just be open-minded, right? Be willing to be innovative. Be willing to do things that your people want, right? Listening to your people, right? Giving them that voice and empowering them to give decisions because they're gonna, if it's their decision, right, they're gonna buy in more to the culture shift, if you will. Right. And I know there's some administrators out there that don't want to shift culture, that they want to stay status quo, right? Because what are the two things cops hate the most, right? Change and staying the same, right? So I mean, so you just have to be able to put yourself second, third, fourth, whatever it is, right? I don't succeed in this organization unless my people succeed. And my success, I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, I don't even know, right? To me, it's leaving a legacy, right? Leaving like this place. And I always tell my guys and gals, right? Leave the chair that you're sitting in currently in a better place for the next person who takes it over, right? Because when I walk out of the sheriff's office in 3 or 4 years,
let me pull up my countdown.
yeah, who's counting? That no one's gonna. I'm not gonna be missed. They're not gonna be sitting there waiting for Justin Miller to make the next decision, or like they do right now. I try to just empower them with the ability to make decisions without fear, without repercussion, and I have to remind myself sometimes that I do allow that, and I can't get upset with them. So I think being a leader is being outside of your comfort zone, right? That you have to sometimes step right outside that comfort zone, right? And doing things that don't feel comfortable, help others, right? Just help others, even if they don't ask. My buddy that I talk about who loves to shame me, servant leadership, right? We ask that question about what does servant leadership mean to you, right? It's the running joke every time I'll do something for them. I'll give them like a little, hey, I was a servant leader, buddy, but making sure your people are taken care of, making sure you give them the means to do their jobs and the ability to do their jobs, of training, the equipment, it all goes hand in hand because that's going to create a better atmosphere for them to want to come to work. So some of the positive things that I've seen in our organization, because we've been shifting our culture, is we have applicants all the time that come and say, I heard what you're doing. I want to work here. And this is the only place I've applied.
Oh, wow.
Right. And in this culture, in this environment of law enforcement, right, that you can pretty much walk in anywhere you want because there's openings everywhere. We have 0 vacancies right now. 0. I can say that we are the only agency in this area that has 0 vacancies.
That is
So I feel like I'm hoping it works. It's working, right?
Yeah.
But again, we have to build our leaders that are behind us too, right? And I talked about leadership versus management briefly earlier, and I harp on that continuously at every single chance I can get when I get in front of one of my supervisors, or if they're struggling, or if I'm doing a evaluation, I talk about leadership skills, right?
Yeah.
Just if you can't be a leader in this organization, you need to demote yourself, because I don't need managers, right? I can teach a kid off the street to come in and do a schedule or to push enter on payroll. But for you to be out with your people, walking around, being with your people, listening to them, encouraging them, training them, right? Not just trying to discipline them at every turn, right? And that's another culture thing that I've worked on, is the discipline aspect, right? And I try to make sure that my supervisors understand that the root word of discipline is disciple, right? It's to teach somebody to not do that thing again. So if discipline is to teach, and I get there's different levels, but you need that first level of discipline is to teach them to be a better employee, because a better employee is going to be a more productive employee. And I think it just all goes into the whole mental health thing, right? Just a culture of wellness, if you will.
It's a system.
And I do have to say, you guys got me up 30 minutes earlier to get to the gym today.
Dang. What?
So it was a 3:55 wake up today.
Oh,
That's the middle of the night is what I call it.
yeah.
Middle of the night.
Chief Deputy Miller, I can't thank you enough. And just talking about leadership role and you kind of, joking about looking at the calendar. And I'll give my husband a little bit of credit. I think he would enjoy a lot of those books that you're reading about leadership. But, kind of the job is to make yourself obsolete. Like the whole point is to have people, and he says that all the time, like you want to be coaching, teaching, leading people that they don't need you, like that they have those skills. And I just want to say that is what I hear you say and describe. And I just think that's incredible and wonderful and speaks volumes that you don't have any open positions. I don't know of any fire department, police department, EMT station that doesn't have at least one open position. So kudos to you for
Knock on wood.
I
But our corrections, we have 0 vacancies, which is even more.
We do?
Yeah, 0. We actually have 5 overhires.
What?
So yes.
Okay, look at us. I'm like, what? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a process. When I took over detentions, I don't want to prolong this, but when I took over detentions in 2016, I had 26 vacancies.
Were the inmates running the
Pretty and not to make anyone upset out in the world, but we had ICE detainees back then. We don't any longer, but so our population was pushing 1,000 every day. Our jail population.
That many vacancies. That's wild.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And
Appreciate it.
I hope I made administrators around the world better, or at least I hope if those that are listening will change their ways so we don't get shamed on podcasts anymore.
100%.
Well, I hope that you felt welcomed here to share your voice.
Absolutely.
And we can't thank you enough, because this is exactly what we need. Right? We need people to step up in your position, to advocate, to say these things. We need to learn from you guys. And yet you're one of the first ones that was willing to do it. So thank you so much. I'm excited.
Absolutely.
We're going to let you go, but we always have our famous line, and that's when the call hits home. Jennifer and I are here for you. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.